Hello everyone, welcome to this Marketing Week webinar in association with KXEN. My name's Mark Schwakey, I'm the editor of Marketing Week and I will be moderating today's webcast. Today's seminar, presented by KXEN and two of their clients, HP and Tip24.com, is just one of the many special and exclusive programs we offer to the marketing community. Do keep visiting our website, www.marketingweek.co.uk, to keep yourself updated about our ongoing series of free web seminars and much more. We aim to help you ensure the greatest possible returns on your marketing investment, whether it's in market research, advertising, analytics, promotions, or other key areas of marketing. So before we get started on today's discussion, entitled Hit the Jackpot with Predictive Power and Infinite Customer Insight, I'd like to address a commonly asked question up front so that you can all sit back and enjoy the presentation. We always get asked, will I be able to view this presentation afterwards? And the answer is yes. If you were to click onto www.marketingweek.co.uk and visit our knowledge bank, you'll be able to receive this webinar and view it in its entirety after the seminar has ended. I should also let you know that this is a live session with a whole host of different interactions. We need you to be as involved as possible to make it more interesting for all of us. So there will be opportunities for you to participate. At various times our speakers are going to introduce a question and I'll cut in at that point. You'll hear my voice as we present a question to you, and every time that happens the options for your preference will drop down in front of you and you should vote fairly quickly. We won't rush you, but fairly quickly. And we'll have a look at the results together. And at the end, there's also a live Q&A session. During the presentation, all participants will be in a listen-only mode. So do participate, albeit silently, by asking those questions and involving yourself in our votes. So we're looking forward to a very interactive webcast. By asking to ask a question, you just go to the box marked questions at the top of your screen, type into the box and press submit. I'll go over exactly how to ask questions again a bit later in the session, and hopefully we can get our presenters answering as many of your queries as possible. So without further ado, let me introduce you to today's principal speaker. Matt Schwab is the SVP European Field Operations for KXEN, and during his after introducing a little bit about the company and the context that we're working in, he's going to introduce two of his top clients. Matt, are you there?
Hello, Mark.
How are you?
Hello, everybody. Yes, I'm pretty good, actually.
Good stuff.
Yes, so hello, everybody. I'm Mathieu Schwab. I'm the SVP European Field Operation with KXEN. I'm really happy to be here today, and I'm really glad to have this presentation with two of our customers, Tip24.com with Mr. Pankaj Arora, who is working with KXEN since more than 1 year now, and with Mark Perret, who is working now with HP as a business consultant, but who has been working for Barclays and Eon since more than 10 years now with KXEN. So I guess that these two experiences could be a valuable experience to share today. So at the first step, I think as we start the introductions, I think it will be a good idea to go through your own presentation for the audience and answer to this quick question about who are you?
So here we go. This is the first question set by KXEN. We want to get a look at the audience that's here today, and by doing so, if you participate, you'll be able to see who else is on this webinar. So what's your role in your company? You should have a set of questions set in front of you. What's your role in your company? Are you A, marketing, B, a business analyst, C, are you involved in data mining, D, are you involved in some kind of customer insight, or E, are you IT? So please do press the button that best describes your job right now. And in a second, I'm going to stop audience voting so we can receive and view the results. I'm going to stop audience voting now. Okay. Well, there you go. Mathieu, there's your audience. 82% of our participants are in marketing. What do you think?
It's good. It's really good.
Is that what you were expecting?
Coming from Marketing Week, yes, I guess.
Well, you know, Marketing Week advocates all of these organizations, all of these organizational departments working together, but please do go on, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm very excited to speak with you about how with KXCN company are getting the maximum value from their customer. With KXCN, since more than 10 years now, our mission and passion has been to bring to our customers the power of predictive analytics to help them getting virtually infinite insight from their own customers. For us, it's not about working on statistics or algorithm in a lab. KXCN is about making predictive analytics accessible, usable, and productive in real operational environments. By boosting predictive power, our customers are optimizing their customer interaction across the customer lifecycle, from acquisition to cross-sell, upsell, and retention. So here is the next question, and I think it's probably also an interesting question. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's one of the reasons I was so interested in this presentation, Matt, is I think predictive analytics is a subject that we could all do with looking into, based purely, especially on the results it tends to get for operations like your own. So, audience, again, please do participate. How familiar are you with predictive analytics? And remember, there's no need to be ashamed. We can't see who you are. So let's see. How familiar are you with predictive analytics? A, predictive what? B, very little. C, somewhat familiar. D, a lot. And E, I'm an absolute genius. So please do. We've got 33 votes in already. Is there anyone else who's willing to put their neck on the line? We've now got 50 votes. So I'm going to stop the audience voting any second now. Let's have a look at those results. Okay. Well, you've got a lot of work to do, Matt. You've got a lot of education to give out today.
That's a good news, actually, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, so with KXCN, we have a large and growing customer base of over 400 customers across North America, Europe, and Asia. We have a particularly strong footprint in telecoms, financial, and retail. And we have some of the world's largest brands as customers like Vodafone, Wells Fargo, Lloyds Bank, Barclays, or Virgin Media. Many new customers are joining our community every quarter, also from other verticals like utilities, e-commerce or content websites, and others. We have also many exciting customers who are expanding their use of KXCN into new departments or expanding use to solve new business problems. So let's talk about what makes KXCN different than traditional data mining tools and why we think our approach is better tightened with your business challenge. First of all, we are agile. That means that we allow our customer to respond quickly to the market pressure. You don't have months to deliver on a campaign or to wait for prediction models. In today's world, you have to move fast. Sorry. As a second point, we are productive. As we all know today, sophisticated marketing approaches require more personalized campaign, and this means more prediction models. But how do you keep up with this exploding demand? This is a major challenge, and we are going to talk more in detail about this. The last one is that we are adaptive. Internet is providing us with a huge amount of data about our customers. The problem is that many of us are only using a fraction of these data. We have to be able to adapt to new data sources as they become available. Today it's internet, new social media, but what's going to be next? And actually, we'll have great example of these three main challenges from Tip24 and HP in their respective presentation. So here is the good news. The good news is that predictive analytics works. It works for our customers. Actually, you can make and you can allow your company to make a lot of money with predictive analytics. Not only by lowering the cost of your marketing campaign through a better targeting of your customers, but also by raising your revenue and your margin by improving retention, cross-sell and upsell, and new customer acquisition. This was the good news. Okay, so here is the bad news. The bad news is that we have many competing priorities for our analytical resources. On this slide, we are just talking about CRM lifecycle problems. We don't even include demand from across the business in supply chain, finance, or general operations. The real problem is having enough bandwidth to deliver on business demand and to do it in a timely manner. So here is a question for you, Mark.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is going to be a difficult one because a lot of people who are with us today have already owned up to not knowing too much about predictive analytics. So what I'd say is for those of you who are using it, or those of you who think you could use it, try and base your answer on I suppose, the ideal. Is that all right with you, Matt?
Yep.
So how do you use predictive analytics? Let's have a look at the options. How do you use predictive analytics? A, not at all. B, considering it. C, occasionally. D, most of the time. And E, all of the time. I mean, let's see how convinced you are by predictive analytics so far, or anything based on this, or anything else you've heard about the use of predictive analytics. How often would you like to use predictive analytics? Perhaps we already have 32 votes in. Let's give it another 5 or 10 seconds. Okay, why don't we stop audience voting now, and let's have a look at the results. Okay, so it looks like people aren't using it at all. We know that already. There's a few people considering it, and some are already using it occasionally, Matt.
Yeah, I guess that's really good news. That means that we have a lot of work to do now. Okay, so we have seen from the previous slide that we have many competing priorities across the business, and that the real issue is having enough bandwidth to manage these priorities. Actually, you simply cannot hire indefinitely more and more data miners. This is because finding a qualified data miner is more and more difficult and expensive for your organizations. All the leading analysts, such as Gartner, Forrester, or Tom Davenport, they are all saying the same. There is rapidly increasing shortage of analytics professionals, and this gap will limit companies' abilities to compete with analytics. The only way to solve this issue is to raise the productivity of these analytics professionals, and we have a lot of customers who were able to solve this problem by using KXCN solution. Cox Communication, for example, had been able to increase the model throughput for 4 analysts from 40 to more than 1,600 prediction models a year. This means a factor 42 in productivity improvement, which is pretty good. Okay, here is the second market trend we see. It is very common to say, but that's really the reality. The internet has made it easier to launch an offer than ever before. This is actually increasing the number of products you have to manage and promote in any given period of time. In parallel, you no longer reach your customer just through the traditional channels, like call center, point of sales, or traditional email. More and more of your business is going online, via the web, via social networks, like Facebook, Twitter, etc. And at the end of the day, finding the right offer at the right time and for the right customer is getting harder and much more complex than even before. We need to increase efficiency and productivity so that we can support growing demand for personalization and more campaigns. The last market trend I would like to share with you is that the web and all new media are creating a hugely more data that we could use for our analytics needs. A lot of the new data sources also bring a level of personalization that we have never had. The reality is that for most of us are still only using a very small part of those data sources to improve our customer interaction. Today, it is social media on the cloud. We don't know what's going to be in 2 years from now. The key is to have a solution like XCN that allow you to be more adaptive to new sources of data, whatever the future brings us. These three market trends that we just shared means that we have actually a skyrocketing demand for predictive modeling. This means not only more models, but also more agile and more efficient production of these predictive models. The problem is that, and we believe, as Gartner believe, there is a bottleneck in deploying modern predictive analytics. And actually, this is called the factory analysis gap by Gartner. With KXCN solution, we are helping you breaking this bottleneck with not only data mining automation, but also by helping you being more productive through a smooth data preparation automation. So why data preparation automation? Well, according to the latest Rexer Group data mining survey, only 30% of the time spent by data miner is spent on productive business-related tasks. That means that 70% of their time is spent in tasks which are manual, repetitive, and prone to error. With KXCN solution, all customers can automate a large portion of that time, and then being much more productive and concentrated on real business matters. So to summarize, the cloud, internet, and all the new media are changing customer relationships. To respond, you need to be more agile, more productive, and adaptive. We have a growing community of over 4 customers using KXCN solutions to boost predictive power. And we'll be glad, of course, to welcome you into this community. So, on that context, I'm glad to welcome Pankaj Arora.
Matt, before we move on to Pankaj, just before you introduce Pankaj, let's if you could answer the question in a line, because we have had a couple of questions in, some of them I can leave till the end, but there's a question out there. What, in a single line, what is predictive analytics? Tell us. You've set a really interesting context there, and I'm wary of moving this thing along now. But what in a line, if you could summarise for our audience what you see as predictive analytics.
Predictive analytics, in one sentence, could be using existing data from your customer from the past in order to predict their behavior in the future.
Good. Okay. Now, you've very quickly, you've mentioned your very large retail, telecom, and financial services clients, and it looks, it's an obvious thing to say that those are sectors that really heavily use data and probably use data better than most other sectors out there, especially to do this kind of customer behavior prediction thing. But does this work for a B2C customer as well? Do you see how the KXCN approach might work for smaller organizations like B2B organizations, for example?
Historically, that's true that these large organizations were really keen to use this kind of solutions. The reality now, and because all the market trends are described, most of the company today actually have a very significant amount of data available, and this is the very first point of departure for using such kind of predictive analytic solutions.
Yeah.
And that's why we really think that it's really the beginning of the story in order to spread over the market this kind of solution in order to give that value to the market.
Good. Okay. Why don't you bring your first guest to the microphone and introduce him to the rest of the audience?
That will be my pleasure. So Tip24.com. Pankaj Arora, Senior Analytic Consultant with Tip24.com. Welcome, Pankaj.
Thank you very much.
That's really my pleasure to introduce you to this presentation, and I'll leave you the microphone.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Mark. Hello, everybody. I'm Pankaj Arora. I work for Tip24, which is an online lottery company. Today, I'm going to take you to the journey of how we adopted the concept of predictive analytics at Tip24, why we did it, how we did it, and what did we achieve out of it. Hopefully, by the end of the session, you will find some good value in this for your own business. The things I'm going to cover today is about the introduction of the company, my role, challenges we faced in the business before we introduced KXEN, how we did it, how we used predictive analytics, one example of one model from the beginning to the end, what results did we achieve out of it, and few personal suggestions. Right. A little bit about my own background. I'm originally from the customer insight background. I've got about 10 years of experience in consulting, retail, gaming, and automotive. I joined Tip24 early last year, and I think that was the time we introduced KXN also into the business.
Thanks.
I'm part of customer insight team, a team of 5, small but very efficient. It's very pan-European. It's central. We cover all international businesses like Germany, Spain, Italy, and UK. Tip24 as a company, we are one of Europe's leading lottery brokers with the presence in the countries I mentioned before, Germany, Spain, Italy, and UK. We've got different websites for all different businesses, different products we offer onto the website. The most popular one is Lotto. You probably would have heard about that, or played, or probably won something. I'll probably talk about that in the next few slides. Okay, here is a question for the audience. Mark?
Yes. So do you have skilled resources to build predictive models? So do you have the resources in-house to help build predictive models? A, none. B, not enough. And C, yeah, we think we've got the right kind of resources to build these sorts of predictive models. So we're getting some votes in. And if we stop voting now and have a look at the results. And the results are that 57% of the market in this situation, of your participants, Pankaj, do not believe they have the right resources to help build the right models.
I think it's probably what I expected. It's still a new field, and I think it's pretty much what I expected out of it, yeah.
Okay, good. So you know who your audience is, you know what they've got.
Yep. Okay. Well, going back to Tip24, the company, this is just a snapshot of the main website, how it looks like. So we have got products in the middle, you can see, and the login and login details on the right-hand side. Just a quick snapshot. This is the snapshot for the registration page. So this is a stage in the customer life cycle where we start an association with the customer when the customer puts in the details. And this is basically my job's kicking because we collect the data. In terms of the customer life cycle, as with many businesses, we have got 3 stages: acquisition, activation, and retention. Though we are on the softer side of gaming industry, the acquisition activity has been restrictive lately, so we have been focusing mainly on the retention side. There are different components of customer life cycle. The most important one is the data. We collect demographic, transactional, and communication preference data. We do regular promotion, special promotion, and channels is pretty much what all e-commerce businesses would do: email, SMS, direct mail, and telephone. We give special emphasis to emails. Another question for the audience.
So which aspects of the customer life cycle would you want to optimize if you were using predictive analytics? So let's have a look at the options again. Which aspects of the customer life cycle would you want to optimize with predictive analytics? Would it be about customer acquisition? Would it be about cross-sell and upsell? Would it be about retention and churn, or would it be about your next best activity? Now, we have a whole lot of you that haven't voted yet, so have a look at those and do get involved, do participate, so Pankaj can give you the best value. And we're seeing the votes come in now. So the aspects of the customer lifecycle you think you could most hope to optimize with predictive analytics. And if we stop the audience voting there and have a look at what's been said, it seems to be a mix, doesn't it? Pankaj, have you got an opinion about where in the customer lifecycle predictive analytics works best?
I think if I have to pick one choice, I would go for retention and churn, because just because of the amount of data you have, more the data you have about the customer, it's better to analyze that and make future prediction. And of course, cross-sell and upsell are also probably as important as retention and churn. Customer acquisition has got few limitation in terms of the data, so you need external providers to provide some data. But obviously, if you have existing transactional data of the customer, nothing like it. So I would go for option C and B.
It's how the three main client sectors that KXEN kind of make their money, isn't it? Retailers especially, rather than trying to grow the number of customers per week, it's trying to grow the number of pounds that they spend on each basket of goods using that kind of data.
Yeah, I mean, there is so much value you can generate out of existing customer base, and it's much cheaper and much more economical to do that than going out and acquire new customers.
Okay, on we go.
Right. Okay, so how did we get into this concept of predictive analytics? So to answer that question, we'll have to go back to the time when we didn't have KXEN. So what were the problems we were facing as a business? Well, we didn't have the targeted approach to contact customers. We had one newsletter, standard newsletter, but we were giving that newsletter to almost all customers, so the approach wasn't targeted. We had customer segmentation, but that was based on isolated parameters, so it's like different dots, but the link between the dots were missing. We measured broad level customer activity, but we lacked the insight whether the customer journey, whether the customer is actually going up the ladder or down the ladder. We didn't really foresee what customer could do next in terms of their behavior. We just didn't do it. We didn't have the resource to do it. And I think these were the things which brought us thinking about how to find a solution. They were affecting the bottom line of the company. And that's how we got into the concept of predictive analytics. Right. So how we use it, what was the process involved, what models we built, how did we really got onto this predictive analytics concept? The first thing we did was to select the right tool to enable to do predictive analytics. We went into the market, looked at different service providers, compared and assessed their performance, and finally selected KXEN. And I think the thing which really impressed us about KXEN was the performance. On a traditional predictive analytics platform, if a model would take about 1 month, the same thing can be done on KXEN in under a week, which is a big win for us and probably for many companies, because you can build more models and you can deploy energy and resources on strategic thinking rather than the model building. So I think on that performance note, we selected KXEN. This is just a list of the predictive models we developed last year. Very much conventional ones. So you have an activity prevention, clustering, which is based on behavioral segmentation, cross-sell, upsell, retention of the best customers, and new acquisition. I think it's important to understand how this predictive analytics really gels with the CRM. This is how it worked in our company. It started off with gathering requirement from the CRM, sitting together, understanding what is that they are trying to achieve, building the model. The good thing about model is that it not only gives you the score against every customer, which is nothing but the likelihood, how likely or unlikely the customer is going to respond to a certain event, but it also gives you the drivers which can be used to plan the concept of the campaign, which is essentially the third step of the predictive analytic process. After that, we go on to the implementation of the campaign, which essentially involves the testing first before we regularize. So we have test group and control group to measure whether or not the model works, whether or not the campaign works. And once we are satisfied with that, we go on to the regularization of the campaign. And finally, of course, the reporting and learning, so that we could improve the next model as we go along. The important thing about this process is that the whole process takes under 2 weeks, which is, to me, is really amazing, because you can build so many models, test the approach, and plan more and more activities, which I think is really, really essential for marketing. The key components of our approach, there were 2 main components. First was the commitment, and second was the cooperation. It really needs, the whole concept of predictive analytics needs commitment from the top management. We were fortunate in our company, we got the support, so we strengthened our analysis team. We had specialists now, only looking at the predictive analytics. The training and development was done in a very structured way. So I think for any business who's planning or thinking about having predictive analytics, it's really important to have the senior people, the top management buying this concept. Of course, the cooperation we are really a close team within the customer insight, and also working very closely with the CRM team, which I think is really important to have this concept successful. Right, I'm going to now give you one example of one model and explain how it worked and the campaign we did from that. I'm going to pick the inactivity prevention model, which was my favorite one, and also the first one we had in the company. I think it was very important because before that we had a concept, and theoretically everything was good. There were a few people who were thinking, okay, it looks pretty good on paper, but how it's going to work in our business? And I think this model really gave us results, didn't really disappoint us. And after that model, things became very much easier for us to carry on and develop more models. Well, who doesn't want to see into the future? Imagine if you have this power of going to the management and say that you know what the customer is going to do in future before even they know themselves. So we pretty much achieved very close to that with this model. The key objective here was to identify customers at risk of becoming inactive, identifying them before they become inactive, and of course, understand the drivers behind inactivity. This is a bit technical. I'm not going to go in detail into how this graph is working, but the main thing here is that if you don't use a model, and if you have to achieve, say, 80% of the target, when I say target, it means the customer who will become inactive. That's what we are trying to predict here. You will have to contact 80% of the population. But with the model, you only contact 20% of the population to achieve the same result, which in other words means you contact far fewer customers to achieve the same result, contact only, in fact, a quarter of customer to reach the same target. So which saves cost, and you don't annoy customers with irrelevant promotions. There are a couple of drivers which are driving the model. The 2 top ones are the time inactive and the number of the ticket revenues in the last 12 months, which is basically recency and value, which I'm sure many marketers would already be familiar with. What it does is that it re-emphasizes the importance of recency and value, and it also gives the ranking and the weightage at how important are these drivers in relation to each other, so that you could use that in planning the concept of the campaign. And that's what we did here. We developed a campaign which was about giving €2 voucher for top 10% of the customers selected by the model. And what it did was it saved us money, because we didn't paste free vouchers on unresponsive customers, and it was highly targeted, so we didn't really annoy any customers with irrelevant offers. This is another snapshot of the data mining campaign, the predictive modeling campaign we did. One is the Las Vegas tour, one is the cruise. The idea here is again the same. Don't give it to everybody, only give to those customers who are most likely to respond to the offer. And what is the success we achieved with this predictive modeling? Well, on average, we achieved 300% uplift in selecting the right customers to target. It's something which brought really big smile to top management. That's what we really accepted before we started with this concept. Not only in terms of the real numbers, it also improved reporting of customer activity through clustering. So we know now whether the customers are really moving in the positive direction or in the negative direction in terms of their journey. We have developed a test and learn culture. It's not a special event anymore here, which used to be before we introduced KXN. So we test and learn, and we do it for every predictive modeling campaign. Better qualitative understanding of customer behavior. We know who our top customers are. How did they really become top customers? So we know the journey they have undergone through, which can be replicated to new customers. We are now better equipped to manage uncertainties in business. Every business has got few uncertainties. We also have one, which is the jackpot, which is too difficult to predict, and external factors. But we have now got ways to manage that. We develop scenarios and make our strategy based around that. And a few personal suggestions from my side how it can work for you. I would say really convert a business problem into data problem very carefully. Define the problem definition very, very carefully, because what you feed into the model is what you get. If you're not clear about what you're trying to achieve, the model, it would be very difficult to understand what the model is delivering. Always define the target very clearly. As I emphasized before, test, learn, and refine. It might sound very obvious, but it's alarming to know that how so many companies are not doing that. Integrate closely with CRM. It's very important to have a close interaction at every stage of the predictive modeling process. And of course, understand business drivers before planning any campaign. The next steps for tip 24 are, of course, automate parts of data mining to save further time, to make it even faster, more efficient, so that we can develop more models. Fine-tune existing models. Every model has got a life, so you have to go back, revisit the model and refine and do whatever changes are required. And of course, develop new models for international businesses. We have achieved a really good success for tip24.com, which is our main website. The idea now for this year for us is to take the concept to other businesses, which is Spain and Italy, and achieve similar result. I think that would keep at least me busy for this year. That's it. I think if you have any question, I'm happy to answer. Thank you very much.
Well, actually, Pankaj, what we'll do is we'll bring you all together, yourself, Matt and Mark, together there are actually questions. The audience has been quite forthcoming with questions for you, which always indicates to me a healthy level of interest in what you're doing, so well done. A very enlightening presentation. But just for now, there are questions to come at the end over sort of how to pick that 20% of your customers to contact, and how to integrate the KXN model with your own CRM system, and what sort of system does that do you need a certain kind of system? But actually we'll get a really good we've got a good amount of time at the end for questions. For now, what I would like to know on a broad level, you mentioned that you switched to KXN last year, and you showed us a fairly detailed graph of how you came to pick the right provider after doing the homework. What's your impressions? How is working with the model of predictive analytics and kind of being engaged with across the business, across tip24.com business? Is it working for everybody? Does it make things easier across the board? What are the kind of the real knuckle points that people have to watch out for in taking on this approach?
I think what we have done, we're relatively new. We are into this. We have been with KXN for about a year now, and I think what we have learned and what we really like is that you can build the models. A lot of processes are automated, so you can build the models much faster. I mean, I've worked on different platforms before joining Tip24, and as I said, it usually takes about a month to build a model, a typical, say, upsell or cross-sell model, but you could potentially do it in less than a week here, which is really powerful because you can then put more focus on more important things. For instance, how to define the problem or how to implement the campaign.
Yeah.
So far, we have been doing it on the marketing side, but we are looking at ways where we could actually support other functions. But yes, as I said, the idea for this year is to take the concept now to international businesses, because now everybody has noticed that we have achieved good results for the main website, and everybody can see that it's very transparent, and the idea now is to take the concept forward. And I think we potentially would be looking at a few further functions we can support with predictive analytics.
Great. Thank you. So look, before I hand back to Matt so he can introduce his next guest, his next client, I'd just like to put an appeal out to you, the listeners. There are lots of you, and I'm sure you must have lots of questions. So just to remind you, we have 15-20 minutes at the end for questions. So hit that questions box at the top left-hand corner of your screen, type in your questions, submit. I'm taking them all now. I can see them on screen, and we will be putting a whole list of questions to all our presenters. Matt, back over to you.
Thank you, Mark. And let's go to the other Mark, Mark Perret, who is a business consultant with HP today, but he will introduce himself about what he has been able to do with TXN in the past. Mark?
Okay, thanks very much, Matt. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm a consultant for Hewlett-Packard's Enterprise Information Solutions department. I've been with Hewlett-Packard for just 8 months now. After 25 years of work on the client side, I moved to HP last year for some new challenges and some new experience. And I'm now involved in helping our clients maximize the value that they get from the data they have available to them. And predictive analytics, propensity modeling, call it what you will, is obviously a key part of that. My last 7 years before Hewlett-Packard were spent as head of CRM at E.ON, a large utility company in the UK. Before that, I did a variety of things at Barclays Bank, where I first used KXEN almost 10 years ago now. And in preparing for this webinar, I realized that I've actually got about 15 years experience of analytics, insight, and CRM on the client side, which is quite frightening in some ways. When I was on the client side, what I wanted typically from a good case study was, what did you do, how did you do it, and most importantly of all, how did you make money from it? And what I want to cover in the next 15 minutes or so are some examples around that theme, where's the money? Just to try and pick up on some of the questions that have already been raised and to try and set the context, what's modelling all about? Well, one of the challenges for sales and marketing people is to put themselves in the shoes of their customers. And this is actually a very, very difficult thing to do because in reality we all think we're normal, but from a statistical perspective actually we're probably not, particularly if we're in sales and marketing. But although the modelling process can be seen as very mechanistic and perhaps a little bit scary and a little bit of a black box because it's about data and probabilities and likelihoods, and there's maybe a bunch of clever but slightly strange analytics guys sat in a dark corner. When you actually build a model, you're really building insights into your customer or prospect base. And it's interesting that as human beings, we tend to build models in our own heads many, many times a day, although we don't actually see it as such. Because what we're doing when we build a statistical model or a mathematical model is we're making some generalizations about what people do, what drives them to do those things. And we're using the mathematical process to try and quantify those generalizations. So to give you a very simplistic example, some personal research undertaken by myself over many years has suggested that there may be a correlation between somebody's sex, their age, and the number of pairs of shoes they own. So, for example, I happen to own 3 pairs of shoes. Now, they're not the 3 pairs of shoes you see on the screen in front of you. But my wife owns about, I think, 8 to 10 pairs of shoes. and my daughter owns about 20 pairs of shoes. Now, what I've done with that data in my head is I've effectively built a model which says if you're male, you're more likely to have a low number of shoes. If you're female, you're more likely to have a higher number of shoes. And the younger you are, and the more female you are, the more pairs of shoes you're likely to have. Now, this model could be completely inaccurate. My experience suggests there may be some element of truth in it. But the serious point about this is that whenever you're building a predictive model, you're effectively building a description of the customers within that model who are doing what that model set out to describe. So if you run a marketing campaign through a direct mail channel, you can identify the people who respond, and you can build a model to say, responders look like this. They have these characteristics. These attributes that we know belong to the responders are driving the response. And that might be something like age, income, geographic location, hobbies, shopping preferences, and so on and so forth. And the great thing about predictive analytics and about modeling is that as long as you can identify a discrete outcome, so somebody who responds versus somebody who doesn't respond, somebody who has one value versus another value, 9 times out of 10 you can build a model to predict that outcome. Matt, I think we have Mark, I think we have a question now.
Yes, I think we do. The slides should move along. So everybody can give an anecdotal story or 10 about how the internet has changed the way we do our business, the way we do marketing. But obviously, Mark's just been talking about building of models and using those models to, progress the business and achieve your business aims. What we want to know is, has the internet increased the number of models you need in your business? Obviously, that can be interpreted in a whole number of ways, but has the internet increased the number of models you need in your business? So let's have a vote now. If you can all press the yes or the no button, A for yes and B for no. And if we stop audience voting now and have a look at those results, well, it's almost an obvious answer, isn't it, Mark? Because the internet has phenomenally increased the amount of data that we all have to deal with.
Absolutely, and I think it's also a factor in what I should talk about next, and that's the concept of speed being money. And I don't think anybody on the call would be surprised to learn that the speed at which businesses need to take decisions these days is shrinking significantly. It's all about reaction time. Now, there are some businesses where reacting to new data in near real time has always been important. So, for example, in oil and gas exploration, where you're drilling or you're exploring in a hostile environment, understanding what's going on in terms of all the sensors that you might deploy and what those sensor readings mean is absolutely critical, as big environmental disasters will testify. But in other sectors, which are kind of closer to home for many people, there's still a need to be a lot more agile in this respect as well. Maybe not requiring near real-time analytics, but certainly decreasing cycle time from months to weeks, or weeks to days, or days maybe to hours. And I think the online world, e-commerce, social media, and the sheer speed at which consumers can be involved with organizations is driving this a lot. And I think this is one of the areas in which KXCN is very well differentiated for 2 main reasons. Firstly, it's not necessary to spend time filtering out data which analysts believe may not be useful in the model. What we would typically do with a KXCN engagement is just throw as much data as we can at that model, because until you analyze the data, it's very difficult to tell based on intuition and gut feel exactly what is going to be a useful predictive variable. I've seen examples for people who respond to online telemarketing offers which say that they're more likely to have a cat than people who don't. Who'd have thought it? Secondly, in terms of the KXCN advantage, the actual time for model build is incredibly quick. It's possible to build a model on a full customer data set in a matter of hours rather than a matter of days or weeks. And this means that the speed to implementation is very significantly reduced. I worked recently with an organisation that built a model to predict response to an online email campaign. The model was built from scratch using KXDN in 48 hours and delivered a 300% uplift in the performance of that email campaign compared with an unmodeled campaign. So getting speed and getting that reaction can add very, very significantly to the ability to get money onto the bottom line. On that same theme of getting money onto the bottom line, I think one of the most interesting challenges for organisations is always remembering where the money comes from. And regardless of what organisations actually sell, whether it's physical products, whether it's services, the money ultimately comes from the customer. And understanding customer value at a low level, at a customer level, is key to formulating sensible sales and marketing strategies. Now, I don't want to blind people with science, but the chart on the screen is a really interesting chart in my view, and it's simply showing customer contribution by percentile. So what that means in practical terms is at the left of the graph, in the first percentile, the customers at the top of that graph are the ones who are contributing the most value to the organisation. On the far right-hand side, the 100th percentile, are customers who are losing the organisation the most money. And I've been lucky enough to see this chart in a number of different sectors. And what's particularly interesting is that the shape of the graph is always the same. There's always about 10% of the top value customers who are contributing an enormous amount of the value, and the bottom 10% who are destroying value. And one of the tricks for organisations is to understand how their acquisition strategy can be tailored to go out and find those valuable customers rather than spend acquisition money on low-value customers. So using KXDN to build a model of customer value and map that model onto the prospect base is a very, very useful way of starting that approach and beginning the journey to managing for value. So by way of example, I've seen an organisation who previously were acquiring 23% of its new recruits in the top 3 value deciles. So that's a below average performance. If you were doing as well as chance, you'd get 30% within the top 3 deciles. What the organisation did through building a prospect value model was go from having 23% of its new recruits in the top 3 value deciles to having 60% of its new recruits in the top 3 value deciles. It achieved this within 6 months. It didn't have to change any of the underlying business process, and indeed, it didn't even tell the sales force it was changing its targeting mechanism. It simply built a new model, described prospect value, and prioritised for acquisition those prospects who had the higher value. Now, in the first year of deployment, that was worth tens of millions of pounds in terms of the value that was brought into the organisation. And that's an incredibly important first step to getting towards some kind of optimisation strategy where a number of different dimensions of your customer can be traded off. And that might be, for example, sales volume, in terms of bringing new customers into the business, versus sales value. Can you bring in lots and lots of customers? Yes, you probably can. What about the value you're bringing in? If you're only bringing in low-value customers who destroy value, then clearly your strategy isn't optimal. Now, Pankaj showed earlier a graph very similar to this, and this is known in the trade as a gains chart. And again, I don't want to try and blind people with science, but it's worth spending a few minutes just trying to explain what this chart is showing us. What it's essentially showing us with the red line labelled unmodelled outcome is the kind of results you would expect when you ran a campaign with just a random customer selection. So what you would essentially see is a direct correspondence between the numbers of offers you made and the numbers of responses. So when you've made an offer to 100% of the customer base, you'll see 100% of your available response. The blue line on the chart is where the uplift comes from a model. So in this case, the chart is modelling the likelihood of a customer to churn. And propensity models are always expressed in probability. So customer towards the bottom of the scale may have a 0.9 probability to got 9% probability to churn. Customer who's less likely to churn may have a 0.4, 0.3 probability to churn. And the great trick with propensity modelling and looking at the gains chart is you can see, as Pankaj illustrated, where the uplift are. So if we look at the graphic on the left, in a non-modelled environment, if you made a campaign to stop churn to the first 20% of the base, you might get 20% response because it's a one-to-one relationship. If you go after the top 20% by the modelled propensity, you'll get 40% of the outcomes. So you've immediately doubled the efficiency of your campaign. What you also see from the gains chart is that there will be a sweet spot within that model where you've completely optimized the trade-off between numbers of customers you go to and the amount of response you generate. And in the case of this model, it's going to be round about the 40% mark. So if you go to 40% of the customer base, you get 63% of the available respondents. And that means two things. As I said, it means a massive cost saving in terms of the activity you undertake, as long as you're disciplined and only go to those top 40%. But what it also means is that the remaining 60% of that customer population, the people who you might have ordinarily included in that campaign, are actually available for other campaigns, which will probably be better for them. So what you need to do for the remaining population is build some more models. Find out of that remaining population what things they are most likely to respond to. And if you can do that 2 or 3 times, that's where you get your 300% uplift Pankaj was referring to. Now what you need to do, obviously as you're developing more models, is also give consideration to how you maintain those models, how you manage those models. And that's where you need some functionality in your tool set around automation, around data management, model maintenance and rebuild. And again, KXCN is very strong in a number of these areas. And what you can typically see in organizations that haven't done a lot of propensity modeling is as soon as you start to deploy those models, you start to get those uplifts that Pankaj was talking about of factors of 2, 3, 4 times performance against traditional campaign activity. And in these challenging economic times, that's a result that you can't afford to ignore. So just to try and bring some of this together, we've talked about a couple of specific examples, and you can deploy predictive analytics at a number of areas in what I've called the analytics CRM roadmap. Another useful dimension for predictive analytics is to support customer segmentations. And I'm sure many of you out there work in organizations where you have at least one major customer segmentation, what I would call a structural segmentation, that you've aligned your organization behind in order to better manage the customer base. What you're also doing, though, in many of the campaigns you're undertaking, is every time you run a campaign, you're doing some segmentation to select customers who you believe are best customers for that campaign. And one of the advantages of predictive analytics and using a tool like KXCN is because of the speed that you are able to do things, you can build a number of prototypes or a number of exploratory segmentations to make sure that your strategy is appropriate. And I've worked with organizations where in their more traditional world, they've maybe campaigned to about 40 discrete groups of customers in a week. But with a proper modeling approach and some investigation of the different ways in which customers can be grouped together for different purposes, so for example for sales, for value, for risk management, for loyalty, they've gone from 40 sales a week to 400 sales a week. The number of customers they can campaign to in total remains the same, but the differentiation between those customer groups is far, far, far greater. That moves into what I would call simple optimization, where you might combine a couple of models. So having a value model and a channel response model. And bringing those two together can identify groups of customers where maybe they're not quite at your value threshold that you would normally campaign to, but they're very high in the channel response area. And you might be prepared to trade off the value that you get from those customers for the cost of acquisition. And doing something like this, I've seen performance increases in terms of campaign ROI, 20 to 30%. That moves up to what I've called full optimization, which is where you're effectively taking all of your entire model library, which might comprise channel response models, value models, churn models, risk models, and so on. And you're combining those models together in an environment which tells you exactly what the next best offer is for any given customer. And that changes the campaign philosophy, if you like, from the typical old world of which customers are eligible for this campaign to an environment where you say, well, I've got a customer here who I can talk to. What offers are available for that customer? And there are a huge number of benefits to that. I've seen real-world increases in terms of return on investment from 10% to 140% using a full optimization approach. But as Pankaj said also, one of the benefits of better targeting is you don't annoy customers with superfluous offers. And I think a good test of how well organizations are doing in terms of their approach to marketing is to reflect on your own experience as customers. You know when an organization is pushing too hard or when it's making a generic offer to you. As customers and as individuals, you can see that. The trick as marketing professionals is to make sure that the campaigns you're responsible for aren't engendering those same emotions in your customers. Mark, back to you.
Thank you, Mark. Well, that was the part that I suppose many of us definitely want to know about, which is the profitability, the making money. Listen, just before we get to questions, and again, audience, listeners, do please submit questions as we're going on. We do have another 15 minutes so that these guys can answer your queries in particular. Mark, I just wanted to know, there's a question that actually has come up during your presentation, and it's slightly on the kind of cynical side perhaps, but actually it's a fair point. Surely this is only what CRM is all about, one of our listeners has said. What's so very new about this? And I was listening to you and I was thinking about it while you were talking, and I was wondering, is the difference between predictive analytics, the way you've described it in a way of, with its propensity for ROI, and straight CRM, the fact that you're actually building customer models for customer acquisition programs to use so that you can not differentiate it from concentrating on the customers you have and actually use that customer model to go out and find the higher paying customers of the future. Is that the main point for you that differentiates this from straight CRM?
I guess the devil's always in the detail, and there are so many definitions of CRM in the world over the past 20 years that it's a difficult question to answer. I think the interesting thing about predictive analytics is that, certainly from a theoretical perspective, if you have a rich data set, you can in effect predict anything. And I think the organizations that are succeeding are getting the most from their investment in analytics are those that are finding more innovative ways to apply it. So, for example, can you predict customer satisfaction scores? I'd argue yes, you can. Can you predict customer value? Yes, absolutely. I've seen it done.
So it's about how the organisation approaches the science and the methodology, and how open the organisation is to using it across every part of its operations.
Yeah, absolutely. And to just pick up on the point about CRM isn't about technology. It's about your relationship with the customer. And the challenge for large organisations is being able to create the feeling of a one-to-one relationship. And what modelling helps to do is to focus in on more closely defined groups of customers. So customers who are likely to churn, customers who prefer this product, customers who prefer that channel. The whole point about CRM is creating that personal feeling, that feeling that the organisation is talking to me, not to a million other customers. And that's where I think predictive analytics is most useful in taking CRM forward. It gives you the ammunition to understand those customers better. And as I said before, to get inside the shoes of your customers. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that. If we could, I'm going to come back to you in a second with a quite different question. But actually, Pankaj, if we could bring you in here.
Yes.
One of your charts was about integrating KXCN's analytics program with your own CRM system. The question's been asked by one of the listeners, do you need a specific system, a specific CRM system, I understand from the question, to ensure can KXCN analytics programs integrate with all systems? How does it work?
Well, it really depends on the campaign management software or the system a company has, typically what KXCN does or a model does is give you a list of customers with high scores. So for instance, if you are predicting the customers who will churn in the next 3 months, it will give you a list of customers with high probability of doing that. So once you have that list of customers, you somehow upload that list into the campaign management software so that you can then do the promotions and emails to only those set of customers. Now that depends on the data warehouse and the interface between data warehouse and the campaign management software. But the output of the KXCN and the model is basically the list of customers with high score for what you're trying to predict. And then it's up to the campaign management software to really have this interface to import that list and then send that to customers.
Okay. I hope that answers your question, listener. Please do keep the questions coming in, because we do have these guys from Tip24 and from Hewlett-Packard here for a while. Still with you, Pankaj, you talked about an 80-20 model of contacting in terms of your customer base. When you're contacting that 20% of your customer base, how is that 20% chosen? Is it a random thing, or do these 20% have particular traits, or is there something that rules them into a group, making them the best people to reach out to?
Well, that's what predictive model is about. That 20% is not random; it's selected on the base of the model. So, what model does is that if you have a list of say 100,000 customers, it gives a score against every 100,000 customer. So a score could vary between 0 and 1. Score closer to 0 is the customer with lower score, and of course closer to 1 is high score. It then sorts it, and then you can select the top 20% or top 10% depending upon the total size of the customer base into your final list. So it's basically based on the scores, and top 10% or top 20% would mean these are the customers with high scores. So you only contact those customers with high score and leave rest for other campaigns.
Fantastic. Okay. I want to bring Matt into it from KXCN. Matt, if you could talk to me on this subject. I'm going to read the question straight. I work for a small healthcare company. Considering predictive analytics for use in our clinics, can the introduction of predictive analytics be cost-effective for SMEs? So do you have a range of tools and software programs that can make this kind of thing cost-effective for small and medium enterprises? Now, I suggest, based on the 300% uplift that the two case studies spoke of, the answer would be yes. Can you fill us in with some detail?
So you know me, Mark, the answer is actually yes. No, more seriously, I guess that yes, today we are definitely concentrated on the customer interaction and the value for a predictive analysis system for the CRM interaction, which is our focus and the focus of our customer. But yes, we can definitely be part of other systems and other needs coming from our customers, and specific case around clinics about perfume tests and all these kind of things. We have some nice customers as well who are doing such kind of things. But just to give you other example, we are also running into some very, very specific maintenance analysis and maintenance data analysis, where we can predict as well some kind of failures and stuff like that. So, predictive analytics is really, of course, again, focused on the customer relationship management behavior, but of course, the methods can be applied to a lot of domain, and yes, the answer is yes, based on that specific answer.
Okay, thank you. We're moving on very quickly because I've got so many more questions to ask in very short time. Pankaj, back to you, and Mark, if you could just hang on in there as well, because I've got something for you at the end of the session. Pankaj, there's a few questions talking about the self-fulfilling nature of the days inactive. You talked about the days inactive. So just to pick one of them, how can you build a model that predicts propensity to churn with a self-predictive variable such as days inactive? Do you understand the sense of the question?
Yeah, I understand. I mean, it's a very typical thing. Whenever we have list of drivers, we look at the variables and see whether the variables are kind of self-predictive, whether they are making sense or not. On this one, the days inactive, it's a bit different from what we're trying to predict. What we're trying to predict is customers who will become inactive or who will churn, and days inactive is the number of days since they last played. So what it's saying is that if you haven't played for a longer period of time, you are more likely not to play again. So what it helps then is to then look at probably some sort of cutoff. So you could then come out with something that if you don't play, if a customer doesn't play for say 1 month, that customer is more likely to churn than those customers who haven't played for 15 days. So it helps in some ways in defining the cutoff and the timing of the campaign. It's something like saying that if you haven't spent much in the last 12 months, you're not going to spend much in the next 1 year, depending in relation to other customers, which is a very much recency dimension. So you have recency, value, and frequency. So what it's saying is the recency dimension, which is important. So I think the answer is it's not really self-predictive. What it's saying is that the more recent you are, that's the relation with the target, the churn or the days inactive or the inactivity you're trying to predict.
Okay, excellent, thank you. And Mark, you've had more than 15 years working with CRM and predictive analytics in a range of recognised customer organisations. You've given us a sense of the ROI that one might expect through using predictive analytics. Well, is there a set of dangers one should look out for, or barriers or obstacles that might come up commonly when adopting this approach for the first time? Something that users who are listening today might expect to get wrong or struggle with to start with?
I think there's a couple of things. Firstly, and I think most importantly, you need to be very clear what you're trying to achieve, and therefore what model or models you should build. And I think if you're starting out, then you probably need some help from people who've done it before, because I think we've got to an interesting point now with technologies like KXCN, where almost anybody can actually build a model if they have the process set out for them and if they have the data available. So an understanding of what you'll do with the model once you've built it, how you'll change what you do to your customers, what different offers you'll make, what different structures you'll bring to your campaigns is incredibly important. The second thing is the data side of things. To build good models, the more data, the better. And it's interesting that a couple of the questions have touched on specific variables. I think one of the challenges when you're setting up your infrastructure to provide that modeling data set is thinking about all of the data you've got as only the tip of the iceberg. So if you take a very simple example of somebody phoning your customer service center, that's one transaction. So you may have customer phoned last week, that's one variable. But from that, and from the data you've built up on your customers, you can immediately derive a number of other variables. So number of calls in the last month, number of calls in the last 6 months, number of calls in the last 12 months, duration of call, subject of call. So the more data you're able to assemble and the more data you're able to derive, the richer and more predictive models your models will be.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Now, we're running out of time here, and we have barely a minute left. So sorry to cut you off, Mark. What I want to do before we leave you is, before we close today's session, is to thank all our presenters for such a series of engaging presentations. So that's KXCN's Matt Chouard, Tip24's Pankaj Arora, and HP's consultant Mark Perret. Thank you, chaps. It's been fantastic. And of course, on behalf of both Marketing Week and KXCN, I also want to thank all of you who've joined us in the webcast today. It's been a pleasure to have you with us, and we hope you enjoyed the webinar. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.